do people who are under economic stress vote as often as at high numbers as other people in the population? Mark, do we know that?
Well, certainly those who are of lower income tend to vote at lower rates, and that's something that's clear. Also, those who have less levels of education, so for example, just a high school diploma or not even a high school diploma, they're less likely to turn out to vote, and that's particularly true for the Latino community. Whether or not somebody who's under stress and how they vote, that's something that we need to explore more. But at the very least, there seem to be some connections that those who are not doing as well are less likely to vote.
If on Election Day 2012 you just do a personal survey and say, okay, how am I doing today, and it doesn't look very good, is that almost certainly a bad recipe for Democrats who are trying to woo Latino voters? I mean, it's still going to be pretty tough a year and a half from now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think something that we should keep in mind is that the homeowner of 2008, more than likely in the Latino community, is not a homeowner in 2012. And you're looking at areas where the Democrats really need the Latino vote to come out. Florida, Nevada, Arizona, areas that got really high hit with the foreclosure rate. And let's not forget, right, foreclosures are still happening in record numbers in our community. So when you're starting to say, go vote because you're bettering your life, you're like, I was actually better about 4 years ago. And that's, how do you communicate that message? It's going to be a difficult one for the Democrats and for the Republicans.
And I'm wondering whether it's really a strong response to say, well, we're not the guys who tanked the economy. Once the years start to pass, and it's 4 and 5 and 6 years since the Bush years when things started to really go south, it's, to a degree, who's president today, not necessarily who got all this, who got the ball rolling downhill.
We suffer from short-term memory, and that's absolutely right.
All voters,
right.
all voters do. So pointing to the last administration and saying, yes, we acknowledge things are bad, but it's the other guys who got things started, might not be as strong not as strong a play.
Well, I mean, someone ought to tell the White House that, because they keep doing that over and over again, regardless of how poorly that is, and that's fine if they want to do that.
But overall, the polling is still pretty strong. The single largest response, who's responsible for the recession, is still George W. Bush.
Well, maybe, but we're going to have a different conversation over the course of the next few months. And as you pointed out, voters aren't going to be interested in that. I mean, there is a reason why Obama's numbers have dropped so dramatically from the time he came into office and in his inauguration. His support among Latino voters has gone down nearly 25%. There's a reason for that. These housing issues, the economic issues, the job issues, all of these things have been made worse by President Obama. And I think that he's facing a real problem when it comes to his reelection. I think that they're going to trot out, the White House and the campaign are going to trot out every scare tactic known to man, and it's going to be up to Republican candidates to figure out, how best to deal with that.
Well, is saying you're more likely to be insured now than you were before a scare tactic, or just the truth? When you're talking about people who were, on the day he took the oath of office, the most low rate of insurance and high rate of underinsurance of all Americans. If you say, hey, look, I'm trying to raise taxes on people who make most of their money from stock dividends. Raise your hand if you make money from stock dividends. Is that going to be something that hurts him in the Latino community? I mean,
that's not what he's doing, though. That's not what he's doing. I mean, his plan to raise taxes on folks that make over $250,000, folks that he calls ultra wealthy, folks who he calls jet owners, inexplicably, because people who make $250,000 cannot own a jet. I'm sorry to break that to you, but what happens when you raise taxes on those folks is that you're raising taxes on up to 3 million small businesses because of the way that the tax laws are written. There are over 3 million, almost 3 million small businesses who will get ensnared in this tax cut on the so-called wealthy. Small businesses create 2/3 of the jobs in the United States.
You are not, if you're earning in the top 2% of American wage earners, you're not so-called wealthy. You're ahead of 98% of the population and closer to 100% of the Latino population. That's not so-called wealthy. That's wealthy. The top 2% of anything is...
Not just of the United States, but of the world, right?
That's what he's saying now. But initially he was saying, you know, raising taxes for those making over $250,000. This is an important issue for Latinos. Latinos are business owners. They're very entrepreneurial. They're starting businesses 3 times as fast as the national average. You take Obamacare, that would destroy Latino small businesses with the mandates on, you know, covering all their employees. These businesses cannot do that. And then when it comes to you know, the simplistic argument of I'm going to give you, I'm going to healthcare coverage to all. In a way, it sounds very condescending to Latinos. What healthcare coverage? Medicaid? Is that what we want to offer Latinos? Why don't we build or an exchange with medical services defined by the government? I don't think Latinos want to see that. But again, the economic impact of Obamacare on Latino businesses is huge, and they're very concerned about increasing taxes for those making over $250,000. The majority of business owners file as individuals, and they would be hit by this. So this is not a winning issue. If they think that they can go with that simplistic argument to the Latino community, they're dead wrong.
Half of all Latino families make under $45,000 a year. So if you think that they're that worried about people who make over $250,000 paying 39% rate instead of 36 or 35.5%, I don't think that's a winner. They'd like to make $250,000 someday, but that seems pretty far away to the vast majority of our people in this country.
You know, and what's interesting, LACLA recently did a poll on Latinos on whether or not they would be willing to raise their own taxes to save Social Security. 84% of Latinos said yes. And Ray, I venture to guess that 84% of Latinos said yes to raising their taxes for Social Security is because they know of someone who depends on that Social Security check, number one. Number two, when we start talking about the debt ceiling, no one's talking about the debt ceiling and saying, yes, we need to make shared sacrifices. When you say that we have to button it up, and the only way we actually raise the debt ceiling is by making sure that we're cutting government programs, how many people at the kitchen table saying, you know what, you're right, we have to slash our own home budgets? But that doesn't mean that Latino families just sit there. They end up going 4, 5, 6 different jobs in order to make sure that they're making, well, maybe not 4, but 2, 3 additional jobs, making sure that ends meet. And we're basically saying we don't want to increase revenue because we don't want to make ends meet. And that's not a conversation.
No one's saying that we don't want to increase revenue. What we're saying is that we don't want to increase taxes, and there's a huge difference. When you cut taxes and create economic growth, revenue increases. The best thing that you can do to get more revenue into the government is to have economic growth.
We cut taxes in a big way earlier in the last decade, and had one of the most anemic recoveries and the most job creation free recoveries of all the recoveries from recessions in the last 75 years. So yes.
But why do we need regressive measures? Why do we need to increase taxes? Isn't it better to reform entitlement programs so those who are extremely wealthy get less benefits, and those who really deserve the benefits get the benefits? I think as Republicans we have to do a better job explaining that by reforming entitlement programs, we're not putting at risk the benefits that those Americans who really need those benefits should get. This is a matter of doing it in a progressive way, as Congressman Ryan's plan would do. But this regressive idea that the way of increasing revenue is only by raising taxes, I mean, to me it sounds like Norway, which taxes their citizens at a 55% rate. Those countries are going into extreme and deep recessions. I don't think we should go follow the European example.
Well, most Latinos in the United States would love to live like Norwegians. Well, maybe not you, and maybe not me, but I'll tell you, when you're in Norway, and I've been in Norway, I
disagree with you 100%. We cannot generalize
if we
about
have
Latinos
a real
again.
conversation about the politics of wealth and poverty in this country, and who gets what and how they get what, which we're not going to have. I'm willing to concede that.
But
we've never had it.
Latino immigrants are coming to the United States. They're not going to Europe, or they're not going to Norway, precisely because of the system of economic opportunities. They come here, they become extremely entrepreneurial. They don't want to be a permanent underclass. They want to be American. And that's
but
the
right
message.
now we're creating a permanent underclass because if we're not giving them the access to the American dream, and that's the problem.